Bride of Dracula, May 1913, Carfax Abbey, Purfleet, England. Well, Dracula was dead, the king of vampires, gone for good, or was he? Well, he was dead, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the carnage was going to end. Two police officers had come into Carfax Abbey to investigate the disturbances that neighbors complained about. Well, the two policemen were men in their late 30s. They were both armed with their clubs and their flashlight. Carfax Abbey was a very creepy place, especially at night. Well, they had made their way down to the basement by the entrance of the catacombs. There, on the bottom of the long stone spiral staircase, they found the body of Milo Renfield. Even though he was laying on his stomach, his head was facing upwards. Someone had twisted his neck all the way around. The work of Dracula. Well, as they freaked out from seeing the sight of the man with the twisted neck, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing exits the catacombs. Well, the two policemen shine their flashlights on Van Helsing and say to him, "Freeze there! Who are you?" Van Helsing, covering his eyes from the flashlights shining into them, he said, "Please, gentlemen, put down your flashlights. I will not hurt you. My name is Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. I am a doctor that specializes in medicine, mainly rare and obscure diseases." Well, when the English police officer asked, "What are you doing, Dr. Van Helsing, and who's this man that's dead on the ground?" Dr. Van Helsing looks at Renfield and says to the policeman, "He was just an unfortunate simpleton who had an appetite for spiders and flies, a victim of Dracula." The policeman asked Van Helsing who was Dracula. Van Helsing went on to explain, "Dracula was the culprit behind the murders around the city, and you'll find his body in that catacomb. He's been disposed of, and his reign of terror is over." Well, the one policeman tells his partner to stay outside and keep an eye on Van Helsing while he went into the catacombs to see what Van Helsing was talking about. And he went into the catacombs with his flashlight shining right on Dracula's body. Dracula had the stake in his heart still, and he had that look on his face, the look of agony, twisted agony from having a stake driven into his heart. The policeman said, "Good God, man, what in the world?" He took out his rag and put it over his mouth, and then exits the catacombs and says to Van Helsing, "Dr. Abraham Van Helsing, you're under arrest for the murder of this Dracula fella and for the murder of this man." Well, Van Helsing said, "Dracula was been dead for 500 years. I did not murder him. I just simply freed him from his curse. And as for the poor simpleton there, he was murdered by Dracula." Well, the policeman said to Van Helsing, "Explain that to the judge when you see him." Well, Van Helsing was arrested, and the bodies of the two men were collected. Well, Van Helsing was taken to another jail, while the bodies of Dracula and Renfield were in the police station inside the jail. The two men that arrested Van Helsing were waiting for a big name inspector to come from London with several other important dignitaries. They have just found out that Dracula was a big name aristocrat from Eastern Europe, and that his murder at the hands of Van Helsing might start international problems. Well, the two men were waiting while their desk phone rang. The lead policeman picks it up. "Good evening, Sergeant Henry Wilson here." It was Inspector Pembroke from Scotland Yard calling, and he said, "Oh, hello, Wilson. It's Inspector Pembroke. I'm here at the train station, and I need you to come pick me up and Lord Jameson and Ambassador Najaji up. Wilson said, "Yes, sir, I'm on my way. Give me about 5 minutes." Inspector Pembroke said, "Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes." Well, Officer Wilson hung up the phone and he tells his partner Terry, "Alright, Terry, listen good. I have to go pick up the inspector and all the other important people. I need you to stay here and keep guard of the bodies." Terry's like, "Oh, great. Why do I have to always get stuck babysitting cadavers?" "Because you have no stripes, man," said Officer Wilson. Then Officer Wilson grabs his cape and grabs his hat and leaves the station. But he comes back in real quick and tells Terry, "Terry, you stay sober." Terry's like, "Oh, great." Then Officer Wilson officially leaves. Well, Terry sat and waited until he heard a weird noise coming from the jail cell. He was a little bit frightened, but he was a policeman and he had to go investigate. So he grabbed the flashlight and entered the jail cell and turned on the flashlight. He looked around, and what he saw was causing the noise was none other than a rat. Well, Terry was frightened of rats, and he quickly turned off the flashlight and got out of that jail cell and shut the jail cell door behind him. Terry said to himself aloud, "God, I bloody hate rats. Oh, I'll take on a lunatic with a knife, but, rats. Well, after he got over his dread and fear, he was startled by a dark figure that was standing at the doorway. It was a woman, clad completely in a long black cape. Her head covered and her face covered. The only thing you could see was her strikingly beautiful blue eyes and her hands. Officer Terry asked startledly, Who are you?" The woman had a very soft and gentle voice, and she said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry to frighten you, officer. I am here to see the body of a Count Dracula." Well, Terry recomposed himself and said to the woman, "I am sorry, ma'am. Only family members are allowed to see him. Are you family?" The woman said, "Not really. He is my ex-husband. We have been separated for quite some time." Officer Terry tells the woman, "Well, I'm sorry, madam. Only family can see him." Then the woman said, "I understand." Then she proceeds to extend her right arm out, showing her beautiful purple amethyst ring to Officer Terry. She says, "Officer, do you like pretty jewelry? Do you like shiny things?" Well, Officer Terry looked at the ring on her right hand. He was captivated by the beauty of the purple gemstone and how it sparkled in the light. Unbeknownst to him, he was being hypnotized by the ring and the woman's soft-spoken voice. She says, "Officer, you're going to let me see that body, and you're going to forget that I ever came." He said, "Yes, I will let you see the body, and I will forget that you came." He was completely under her control now. Well, a few hours later, Officer Wilson returned to the station with the inspector and the ambassador. Officer Terry was sitting at the desk reading. He gets up and says, "Oh, Officer Wilson, you're back." He goes over, salutes Inspector Pembroke, and then shakes his hand, and then salutes the Romanian ambassador, and then shakes his hand. Well, the men, did their formalities, and Officer Wilson guided the two men into the jail cell, where Officer Terry heard Officer Wilson say, "Egad, man! Terry, get over here now!" Officer Terry goes running in to the jail cell, and Officer Wilson was fuming mad and asked him, "Good God, man, what happened to the body of this Count Dracula? He was here when I left." Officer Terry was like, I don't know." He goes on to say, "No one's visited the jail cell all night, Officer Wilson. I don't know. Someone must have come in through the bars or something and stole the body." Then all the men were frightened briefly by the sound of howling coming from the outside in the distance. Well, meanwhile, in the outskirts of the city, The woman who visited the police station and stole Dracula's body was standing next to a funeral pyre that contained Dracula's body. The cloth that was covering her face was off, revealing a very beautiful woman, and her hood was off too, revealing beautiful jet black hair. But she was not alone. Off to the side was her manservant, a gypsy by the name of Sandor. Sandor was a huge man, probably about 6'5". He was built like a truck. Well, she was sprinkling dust onto the funeral pyre, causing the flames to go higher. Then she said to the lifeless body of Dracula on the funeral pyre, "Oh, my dear prince, you're finally dead. I'm sure it's your taste for women that has undone you. Well, so be it. I am here to free your soul and send you back to hell," she said to the lifeless body of Dracula on the funeral pyre. Then she began to say some enchantments. "O Prince of Darkness, I call on thee. I call on thee from the depths of hell. I call on thee from the caverns of smokeless fire. I call on thee. I call on thee from the subterranean rivers of blood. I call on thee. I call on thee in the name of the false prophets and the 7 plagues. I call on thee, Prince of Fire. I call on thee in the name of all things that are dark and wicked that worship you. I call on thee, Prince of Fire." Then she begins to say a few more enchantments, but this time in Latin. "Taurus ignem princeps anime a corpore, dona mihi virtutem suam, regina mi." Translated in English, what she said was, "Prince of Fire, unbind this soul from his body. Grant me his power. Make me queen." After saying those incantations, suddenly the flames of the funeral pyre rose high and got very hot. Soon, the flames consumed Dracula's flesh, leaving his charred bones. All of a sudden, the vampiress could see an energy leaving Dracula's body. It was a soul finally free, unbound from his flesh, going to his destination, hell, and a streak of blue light. Afterwards, the vampiress felt something strange, like she was receiving all the great power that Dracula once possessed. It was now hers. She was elated now. She screams, "Sandor! Sandor! It worked! It worked! He is gone! I have received his power! I am now the new reigning monarch of vampires!" Sandor says to her, "My mistress, I am pleased at your new title, and may I say, it is an honor to serve the new queen of the vampires." She says, "Sandor, let's go and celebrate. I want to feed." Well, the two of them left the funeral pyre. There was nothing much left of Dracula's body now, just the soft gray ashes. The king of the vampires was truly dead, or was he? Later on that night, in the streets of London, it was a hustle and bustle of a busy city. Well, one man was walking, decked out in top hat and the finest evening wear. He was probably on his way to who knows what social gathering. Well, he stops by a corner of a building. He puts a cigarette in his mouth and he takes his match. He strikes the match head on the side of the building. As he was about to light his cigarette, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was the hands of the vampiress. The man turned around to look, and he saw the striking, beautiful woman that is the vampiress. She lets out a smile. He takes a cigarette out of his mouth, and he lets out a smile. And then soon, the happy moment turns into a moment of terror. Well, after she fed, we see her back in her art studio located above a shop somewhere in London. The shop was closing up for the night. Well, she was up in the art studio playing her piano while she was talking to her manservant Sandor. As she was talking to Sandor, she was recounting about the time that she met Dracula, that magical time 100 years ago. She was young and in love with Dracula. At the time, she said she didn't know about his vampirism. She talks and talks, rejoicing about that happy time when she chose Dracula above all the other suitors chasing her. Then she recalls about the night they got married, and the night that Dracula gave her the one wedding present she didn't expect, the bite, the curse, something that she was still bitter about and never got over. Sandor says, "My lady, I understand your anguish, but you shouldn't feel bad about being a vampire, madam. It is so nice to have eternal life, even though you're confined to the darkness." Well, the vampiress says, "Oh, Sandor, I love being a vampire, but I hate it at the same time. To be confined to the night, to not enjoy the beauty of the days like I once did when I was living. But Dracula did give me a good gift, even though I am confined to the night." Well, she recounts about that dark day when Dracula mysteriously left her. She says to Sandor, "Oh, Sandor, I'll never forget that day. He left me without no warning. One day he was gone, and I was alone, reigning in my castle in Hungary. But now that he's gone," she says, "now that he's gone, his power is mine, and I shall be ruler of all vampires," she says. But then she just stops talking and concentrates on playing the song on the piano. She concentrates. Sandor noticed by the silence that she was upset, very upset that Dracula was dead. She still held feelings for him. As she concentrated on the music play, then she suddenly stopped playing the piano, and then she proceeded to slam the keys in anger. Then she says, "Damn, damn, damn." She starts shedding tears and she begins to cry. She mourns for Dracula. She says, "Sandor, why do I miss him dearly? Why do I still love him?" Sandor says, "My queen, there's so many of us who have that one person in life that we love. Even though they're gone or they left us, we'll never forget them. We will never truly stop loving them. I'm in the same shoe, my mistress." Then the vampiress looks at Sandor, really Sandor, as she wipes away the tears from her eyes. "Who is this woman that you pine for still?" Sandor says, "My mistress. It is no concern. She's long gone. I have one goal in life now, my mistress," he says, "to serve you and to become a vampire." As she continued wiping the tears away from her eyes, she says, "Sandor, you'll get that wish. You'll be a great vampire. Keep serving me well, and I will make you a very powerful vampire and teach you many of my secrets." Sandor lets out a big smile. He says, "I greatly appreciate it, my mistress." Then she says to Sandor, she gets up from the piano, "I will paint. Find me a young woman, maybe late teens, early 20s. Sandor says, "Yes, my mistress." He gets up and leaves the studio. Later on, he returns to the studio with a nice young blonde-haired woman. She was about 20, 21, beautiful honey blonde hair that was curly, very thin. She looked very ragged. She probably was a poor girl with nothing much going in life. Then Sandor introduced the young girl to the vampiress. He says, "Anna, this is my employer, Nadia Zaleska. She's Hungarian. Nadia says to Anna, "It's good to meet you, Anna," said Nadia. "I had you brought here, or well, I had my assistant, Sandor, look for a young female for my next painting. I'm doing a head and shoulders profile, and I needed a young woman about your age." Well, Anna said, "I'm glad you hired me. When I saw your friend here, well, let's say he's intimidating looking. I thought he wanted me for other reasons, but he convinced me. He told me you would feed me and pay me some money for my time as a model." Nadia says to the young woman, "Yes, I will." And she says to Sandor, "Sandor, get this woman some wine and some crackers to hold her over until we finished." Anna was happy. She was finally going to get some food. And she was going to get some money too. Well, Sandor went and got some crackers and wine, and young Anna wolfed it down. Well, Nadia says to Anna, "All right, I want you to undo your blouse and expose your shoulders." Anna says, "Okay." So Anna does what Nadia ordered. Well, Nadia studied the young girl and came over to her. She went and adjusted the young girl's hair a little bit to her liking, and then she began to caress and feel the shoulders of the young woman. It made Anna very uncomfortable, but she needed the money and she needed the food. Soon, Nadia sat down, grabbed her pad, and began sketching Anna. Nadia sketched with such artistic precision. She made a very beautiful sketch drawing of young Anna. After she was done, she gets up and thanks Anna for her time to pose as a model. Then she walked around Anna and began feeling Anna's shoulders. Anna was starting to get very uncomfortable with the vampiress's advances. She says, "Well, I'm thankful that you gave me some food, and I would like my money and go. I don't think I want to be a model again," she says nervously. Well, Nadia says, "Don't be silly. You're a very beautiful young girl. Very beautiful. You should become a model. In fact, I'm a well-connected woman. I could help you. You won't have to be living on the streets anymore or working at the factory. Beauty like yours can get easily ruined. Just let me help you." As she caressed young Anna's cheeks after she said that, well, young Anna's like, I'm sorry, ma'am. No, I'll be leaving now. You can pay me and I'll go. I'll skip out on the food. Those crackers and wines filled me up," she says. Well, then Nadia says to Anna, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I want to show you something before you go," she says. Then Nadia shows her her big amethyst ring. She's like, "Do you like jewelry?" Anna says, "Yes." Then Nadia says to her, "Well, look at my beautiful ring. It's very old. It's very beautiful." As the ring was sparkling in the light, Anna fell for the hypnotic control of Nadia. It was over. The next day at the home of Dr. Jeffrey Garth, a prominent psychologist in London, he was in his hunting gear. He had got his rifle, got his stuff, and his butler had some other things too. He was going on his big hunting trip that he had been planning for a while. But little did he suspect that his hunting trip was not going to happen. Well, as he had readied, he had opened the door to his home, and out in the front door there was a young woman that was about to knock when the door opened. It was his assistant, Janet. He doesn't like Janet very much. He thinks she's annoying. Janet is in love with him, but, well, it's a little tense. Well, Janet's like, "Oh, thank goodness, Dr. Garth, I found you before you left. You're needed urgently." Jeffrey says, "Oh, come on, Janet. I'm going on my hunting trip. Tell the hospital to tell the other doctors to take care of it." "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," she says. "It's not a medical emergency. It's a law emergency. It's your teacher and mentor, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. He's been arrested for murder. He murdered some big Romanian count or something, I believe, and he's asked for you to defend him. Dr. Garth is like, what? Why does he want me to defend him? He needs a lawyer, not a psychologist. Janet's like, well, he's asked for you, and the head inspector, Scotland Yard, wants you there immediately. Great, said Dr. Garth. Great, 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 great. He gives his rifle to his butler and drops the rest of his luggage, and he's like, I should have known better to buy all this stuff. Well, unpack everything, he tells his butler, and just, well, we'll have to wait till next year, he says. He gets into his roadster, starts it up. Janet smiles and he tells her, shut up. Finally, the doctor's roadster arrives at the headquarters of Scotland Yard. Then the two people get out of the roadster. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Garth had a very nasty look on his face, the look of a man whose day was ruined. Well, he goes into the Scotland Yard building and he's directed to the offices of Sir Basil Humphrey, the director of Scotland Yard. In his office, he sees Humphrey and a familiar face, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. Dr. Van Helsing was just being treated very nicely. He was not in handcuffs or nothing. He gets up when he sees Dr. Garth and had that nice happy look on his face of someone who hasn't seen an old friend in years, and is like, oh, Dr. Garth, thank God you came. I need your help, young man. I really need your help. Dr. Garth says, Dr. Van Helsing, you don't need my help. You need a good lawyer. You murdered some continental aristocrat? I can't believe it, Doctor. You would never do anything like that. Not the Dr. Van Helsing I knew, said Dr. Garth. Sir Humphrey said, well, that's what I said. I'm well aware of Dr. Van Helsing's reputation, but he claims that the Count was a vampire. Dr. Garth is like, what? Vampire? Oh, no, 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 Dr. Garth said. Dr. Van Helsing, don't tell me you're getting crazy. Dr. Van Helsing tells Dr. Garth, no, my young friend, no, I'm not crazy. It is the truth. Vampires do exist, and Dracula was the fountainhead of this obscene cult for centuries, and I destroyed him. Dr. Garth was realizing the severity of the situation. Not only did Van Helsing murder somebody, but now he believed that this person was some fictional monster that doesn't even exist. So Dr. Garth thought. Then Sir Humphreys says, well, Dr. Garth, Dr. Van Helsing has requested you to help him, to prove that he's sane, and to prove that, as he snickered, that vampires exist, which I find it highly unlikely. Either way, said Sir Humphrey, you have 3 weeks to get Dr. Van Helsing's case together, or else, if he's found guilty, he will be hanged, said Sir Humphreys. Dr. Garth says to Sir Humphreys, no, I won't let it happen. Don't worry. Dr. Van Helsing, I'll prove your innocence, as he looked to the old doctor, telling him, well, if you excuse me, gentlemen, I have some affairs to attend to. I wish you the best of luck, Dr. Van Helsing, said Dr. Garth. Well, a couple nights later, at a very luxurious flat in London, this luxurious flat belonged to none other than Lady Esme Hammond. She was having a huge party to unveil some new artists that had come from Europe. She was middle-aged, woman about town, loved to throw big luxurious parties and invite all the big names in high London society. Well, at the party, Dr. Garth was there with Janet. He was talking, drinking, having a good time like everybody else was. There he noticed the paintings of the young artist that Lady Hammond was talking about. Well, the time of the big reveal had come. Lady Hammond taps the wine glass, and then she begins to speak and says, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming here tonight. You all come here to eat my food, drink my champagne, and admire these lovely paintings from a young Hungarian woman. She's actually a countess herself. Then she says, "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Countess Nadia Zaleska." Then the young, beautiful Countess Nadia enters a room wearing a beautiful green and blue dress. Her hair done up of the hairstyle of the time period, and she was just a beautiful sight to behold as the crowd clapped welcoming her. Well, not everybody was welcoming. Janet got jealous instantly. She knew a beautiful woman when she saw one, and Nadia was just drop dead gorgeous. While, of course, Dr. Garth noticed her right away and was captivated by her beauty. Before he could approach her to introduce himself, Nadia does address the crowd at the party and says, "Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to ask me the one question I know you're going to ask, yes, these paintings are for sale. If you're interested in buying them, please just see me and we can discuss prices." Well, finally, Dr. Garth made it up to her, and he introduced himself and he says, "My lady countess, I am Dr. Jeffrey Garth, doctor of psychology at the hospital. I am pleased to make your acquaintance." Dr. Garth grabs the countess's left hand and kisses it. He had noticed something about the countess's hand when he kissed it and even held it in his hand. Her hand was ice cold, but he figured it was just the cool air outside. Afterwards, Janet comes up and to him and says, "Oh, Dr. Garth, I see that you made the acquaintance of the Countess." Countess Zaleska let out a slight giggle. She says, "Oh, Dr. Garth, I did not know you had a date here with you." Dr. Garth quickly said to the Countess, "I'm sorry, Countess, you must forgive my assistant, Janet. She gets a little jealous when there's a real woman around." Everybody that was around her and around them started letting out a bit of a giggle. That did not please Janet at all. Well, other people began introducing themselves to the Countess, while Janet kind of pulls the doctor's arm and says, "Dr. Garth, would you please act professional? She's a countess and way above you. You're not a nobleman." Garth says to Janet, "Would you shut up? Can I not talk to one woman once without you getting jealous? And besides, we're not even boyfriend or girlfriend or married, so why don't you find yourself a man here? There's plenty of single, well-to-do men here," he says to Janet very sternly. Well, later on at the party, the Countess came up to Dr. Garth and she says, "Dr. Garth, when you introduced yourself and said you were a psychologist, that interested me," she says, "because I really do need to see a head doctor for some personal problems. A tragedy that has struck me recently and has got me very depressed," she says to the doctor. Dr. Garth is like, "Oh, well, it's not every day that a countess from another country wants to seek the help of a London-based psychologist." She lets out a slight smile, and Dr. Garth couldn't help but notice her beautiful sky blue eyes that were just so enchanting, that just complimented the rest of her. He says to the Countess, "Oh, I'd be happy to help you if you wish to come to the hospital. I could put an appointment here right now." She says to the doctor, "No, I really don't want to come to a hospital. I prefer if you come to my flat. I'm staying in the flat below Lady Hammond's until I head back to Hungary," she says. "I've come here to London to take care of some personal business, and I just really need to talk to somebody professional," she said. "Can you come tomorrow night?" she asked Dr. Garth. Dr. Garth was shocked and was like, "Oh, sure, I can free something tomorrow night and I'll be here." She lets out a smile, like, "Oh, thank you, Dr. Garth, thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." Dr. Garth lets out a smile and says, "It is my pleasure," he says to the Countess. "That's why I went into medicine." They let out a smile and they talked a little bit more before Janet reared her jealous head and kind of disrupted it. And she says to Dr. Garth, "Dr. Garth, don't you remember tomorrow night you have that appointment Dr. Garth says to Janet, a bit sternly, he's like, I can cancel that appointment tomorrow night. It is not important. Your father is not important, he says to her sternly. Well, I'll be, said Janet, and walks off. Well, Dr. Garth turns to look at the Countess and says, Countess Zaleska, you gotta excuse my assistant. She gets jealous every time I talk to another woman. Well, the Countess looks at Janet with a look of any woman who feels challenged. She says, well, you gotta excuse her. She's, not of nobility, she says. Well, Dr. Garth did mention to the Countess, yeah, she's kind of the nobility. Her father's a baronet. And, well, not a prominent baronet, but, he is a baronet. Countess Zaleska said, oh, well, it seems like her father didn't do a good job with the etiquette. And her behavior is not of a woman who is the daughter of a baronet. Dr. Garth lets out a slight chuckle. So does the Countess after that comment. Well, the night was over, the party was over, and Dr. Garth was in his house thinking about the Countess. Suddenly, the phone rings. When Dr. Garth answered the phone, it was somebody claiming that a patient was seeing pink elephants. Whoever was talking was disguising their voice. Suddenly, he realized who it was. It was Janet, a woman her age, acting so freaking childish that he told her off and hung up the phone. He's like, I can't believe the nerve of that woman. Suddenly, a light bulb lit up in his head. He grabs his phone, calls the hospital operator, and he tells the lady at the desk to call Janet's house every half an hour until 3 in the morning. Well, the lady at the hospital operating desk said, okay, Dr. Garth, your orders are your orders. Then he hangs up and he says, okay, Janet, you want to be childish and immature? Two could play that game. Well, the next morning at the hospital, as Dr. Garth was attending to his patients, Janet comes walking in and says, well, Dr. Garth, I give you credit where credit's due, telling the hospital operator to call my house every half an hour until 3 in the morning. Dr. Garth says to Janet, well, you want to act like an immature child? I can play that game too. Well, suddenly, after their little brief conversation, a nurse comes up and says, Dr. Garth, sir, we have a woman coming in. She's been found by the river. Apparently, Dr. Garth, said the nurse, she's conscious, but she's not responding to anything. We try to call her, we try to snap our fingers, wave her face. She just doesn't respond to any external stimuli. Dr. Garth found it curious. He says, Janet, come with me. Well, they go to the room where the young woman was at. Even though Dr. Garth didn't know her who she was, it was none other than young Anna, a victim of the Countess. She just laid there in bed in a catatonic state. Dr. Garth tried everything to rouse her out of her state, but nothing. Then Dr. Garth turns to look at Janet and says, Janet, go give me my light machine. Janet says, yes, Dr. Garth. Well, she comes back moments later with a bizarre-looking machine. It had several little fans on it and a light behind it. Dr. Garth plugged it in, started the machine up, and it began making a weird noise as the fans turning were causing a flickering effect with the light. Dr. Garth was going to do hypnosis. The nurse asked Dr. Garth, what's wrong with her? Dr. Garth said, this woman's under a hypnotic state. I'm going to try to rouse her out of it. Well, Dr. Garth's voice changed as he spoke to the woman. He says to her, Madam, I am your friend. I am Dr. Jeffrey Garth. I am a psychologist, and I'm trying to bring you out of your trance. Well, as he was doing the process, it was working. The woman began reacting. He asks her, what's your name? The woman said, Anna. What's going on? He asked her, who put you under this trance? She began going through the motions, and she began screaming, no, please don't touch me. I don't want to be your model anymore. Please don't touch me. No, I'm not going to model for you. No, get your hands away from there. Please, stop. No. Then the girl let out a scream that frightened everybody in the room, and then she slumped her head. Dr. Garth tried to wake her up. She was not waking up. Then he put his fingers over her carotid arteries to feel for a pulse. He said to the nurse, "Please give me my stethoscope." The nurse quickly gave him a stethoscope. He tried to listen to the young woman's heart. It was not beating. She was dead. Well, Dr. Garth called the pronouncement of death and informed the nurses to take the body to the morgue and inform the police on what happened. Well, night had fallen, and Dr. Garth had arrived at the home of Countess Zaleska. He pushes the button for the doorbell. Well, the door was opened, but it was not opened by the Countess. It was opened by Sandor. Dr. Garth was kind of shocked about Sandor. Sandor was big and menacing looking, and wearing a doorman's uniform. Sandor says, Dr. Garth, milady is expecting you. Please follow me." Well, Sandor took Dr. Garth to the living room of the flat and asked Dr. Garth, "Would you care for anything to drink, sir?" Dr. Garth says, "No, not when I'm seeing a patient, but thank you." Sandor says, "So be it, sir." Then he leaves the living room. Well, Garth was waiting for the Countess to come in and looked at the beautiful paintings in her room. Well, he noticed one painting there. It was a painting of a certain looking man. He noticed that the painting had a glass display case beneath it, and it had some sort of signet ring, and it said on the display case, "Vlad Basarab III, Vlad the Impaler." The name rung a few bells in the doctor's head. He's heard it before, but he doesn't know where. Then he hears the sweet voice of the Countess as she explains about Vlad the Impaler and his rather dark history. Dr. Garth turns to look at her. She was wearing a beautiful red and blue dress, her hair done up of the time period, just as beautiful as she was the night he met her at the party. She says, "Well, I hope I didn't trouble you with such a dark story about this man that you see in the painting there. I painted it myself based off a copy that I saw in my home country," she says. Dr. Garth says, "No, I find it fascinating. I would have loved to psychoanalyze this man to see why he did what he did." Either way, the two of them decided to talk, and he asked the Countess, "So, Countess, what is bothering you?" Countess Zaleska says, "Well, Dr. Garth, let me tell you a story about boy meets girl, husband and wife. I once knew a man a long time ago. I met him, fell in love with him, he fell in love with me, we got married. It was a short but happy marriage. Then he left me. We never divorced, we just separated. He lived his life, I lived my life. We saw each other occasionally in social gatherings. Our relationship was amicable, but I still love him, and I think deep down inside he still loved me. But he died and left me everything, and I can't seem to get over his death," she says. Then Dr. Garth went on to explain, "This is perfectly normal, Countess. You still loved your husband, and when he died, his death is really striking you hard, because you wondered if he really loved you the way you think he did or hoped he did, and you just want closure. I deal with this case all the time," he says to the Countess. "All you have to do is just move on. There's nothing I can really do for you," he says. "Time is the healer of all wounds." But then Dr. Garth decided to ask the Countess the name of her husband. He says, "Countess, you don't mind if I ask you, what was the name of your husband?" Well, the Countess began to say the words. His name was Count then she was interrupted by Sandor. Sandor had come in the room and says, "I am sorry, milady. Dr. Garth, we just received a phone call here. It's an emergency. They need you back at the hospital. One of your patients is trying to commit suicide." Dr. Garth's like, "Oh dear my. I'm sorry, Countess, I have to go." Countess Zaleska says, "I understand, doctor. Good luck." Well, Dr. Garth rocketed out of the flat. As soon as he left, Countess Zaleska orders Sandor to get her cape. Sandor comes back in the room with a nice matching colored cape that went well with her dress that she was wearing. Well, after she puts on the cape, Sandor opens the window, and then Zaleska outstretches the cape with her arms and turns into a bat and flies off. Well, at the hospital, Dr. Garth managed to calm the patient down and talked him out of suicide. After the patient was taken to its room, Dr. Garth decided to go home. As he's walking down the hospital hallway, he runs into Janet. She says, "Oh, Dr. Garth, you're here. I thought you were attending to the Countess." He says to Janet, "No, there was a suicide attempt, and I was called in to deal with it, and let's just say the patient's doing well. I think he's going to seek professional help." Well, anyways, he says, "I gotta go home. I'm tired." Well, Janet says, "Dr. Garth, wait. I'm terribly sorry. I have feelings for you," she says, "and I get so jealous when you're around other women. I know I shouldn't be acting like this at my age, but can you please accept my apology?" she asks the doctor. Dr. Garth says, Sure, I'll accept your apology." Then Janet went on to ask the doctor, "So, Dr. Garth, out of female curiosity, how was the home of the illustrious Countess?" Dr. Garth said, "Well, nothing out of the ordinary, just like any other woman's home." But then Garth realized something, and he says to Janet, "Janet, I just realized something." Janet said, "Yes?" "Tonight was the first woman's home I had been in, and it was not decked out in a million mirrors." Well, Janet says, "Oh, doctor, not all those women are vain and decorate our houses entirely in mirrors." Well, Garth's like, "I don't know, it was unusual." Anyways, he says, "I'm going home. It's been a tiring day, and now a tiring night." So, as Dr. Garth walks down the hallway with Janet behind him, he noticed that they were wheeling in a patient through the door in a gurney. The nurse, who was at the foot of the gurney, quickly runs up to Dr. Garth and asks Dr. Garth with a little desperation in her voice, Dr. Garth, have you seen Dr. Lawson? We have a critical patient here." Dr. Garth says, "No, I haven't seen him yet." "What's going on with this patient?" he asked. The nurse says, "Oh, it's massive blood loss. They found him by the river. Someone said that he was attacked by a person that bit him in the neck, and he lost all that blood." Dr. Garth was curious. He walks over to the dying patient, and he looks at the neck. Sure enough, he saw the telltale sign of the vampire, 2 puncture marks in the jugular, swollen and discolored, with some blood still running out of it. Suddenly, it was dawning on him. The stories of vampires, Dr. Van Helsing. Janet was like, "Oh dear God, who attacked him and did this?" Well, the nurse says, "We don't know. We just go by what the person who brought him here said." Dr. Garth turns to look at Janet and says to Janet, "Janet, go find Dr. Lawson quickly and tell him to get out here as soon as he can." "Yes," she said, and runs off the opposite direction. Dr. Garth then ran for the exit, puzzling everybody. Later on, he was at the office of Sir Basil Humphrey, along with Van Helsing. It was late night, and Sir Humphrey was not happy to be pulled out of bed at this hour. But Dr. Garth says, "Gentlemen, I'm sorry to wake up everybody at this hour." He turns around to Dr. Van Helsing and says, "Dr. Van Helsing, you're right, there is such thing as vampires." Then Dr. Garth went on to explain what he saw at the hospital. Dr. Van Helsing's like, "No, it can't be. It can't be. Dracula's dead. I killed him myself," he says. Dr. Garth is like, "Well, there's somebody attacking and draining people's blood." Then Van Helsing says, "It has to be a victim he is. One victim that we did not find, who became a vampire, and now is attacking other people." Sir Humphrey's like, "Oh, listen to you two. This is ridiculous. Some guy comes into the hospital with throat injuries, loses a lot of blood, and you say that he was attacked by vampires." Well, Dr. Garth says, "I find it hard to believe, but we have an eyewitness. The man who brought him in said he saw someone attack this man, bite him in the neck, and then just run off, leaving him there to die. Of course, the witness said it was dark and only saw that figure attack his friend. And that's all we have to go by." Sir Humphrey says, no, no, no. I'm not going to entertain the idea of vampires running in the city. No, 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 he says. Dr. Garth says, Sir Humphrey, I know it sounds preposterous, but let's just say I saw the evidence and we have an eyewitness. But the question is, who is the vampire? Well, Sir Humphrey's like, okay, I've heard enough. Listen, I want you, Dr. Garth, to go home. I don't want you involved in this case. And I'll call the guards to take Dr. Van Helsing back to his cell. Then Dr. Garth says to Sir Humphrey, well, I am sorry I troubled you. And then he turns to look at Dr. Van Helsing and says, Dr. Van Helsing, I'm sorry I failed you, but don't worry. I want to get the evidence. You're going to be proven innocent. Well, Dr. Garth leaves the office. Well, about a day or two later, as Dr. Garth had been investigating with religiosity about this vampire attack and all the other attacks that happened in Purfleet, it was all getting very evident that when Dracula did arrive to England, these attacks happened. But the question is, if he's dead, who's still continuing these attacks? Well, he closes his case files, rubs his eyes as he was tired, and then he hears a knock on the door. He opens the door, and it was Janet. Janet says, Dr. Garth, may I come in? Dr. Garth said, of course, come in, Janet. He lets her in and shuts the door behind her. Janet looks around at his house and says, well, Dr. Garth, I always did admire your home, even though I think it could use a woman's touch. Dr. Garth let out a slight smile. He's like, Janet, what is it? Let it better be important. This case is getting to me. Well, Janet says, I just come here to tell you personally, doctor, that the patient with the blood loss survived. The blood transfusions were successful. Dr. Garth said, oh, thank God for small favors. That's it? He says to her. She says, that is it, doctor. Well, he says, if you want to make yourself at home, I'm going to go clean myself up. Maybe I'll take you to dinner, because my butler's got the night off, he says, and he didn't cook anything. Janet says, well, that sounds like a great idea. I'll sit here on the couch and wait for you. Well, the doctor went upstairs to get himself showered and ready for dinner. Well, while Janet waited, a little while had passed. She heard a knock on the door. She goes to answer the door, and to her surprise, it was Countess Zaleska. Countess Zaleska was wearing a beautiful green dress and matching cape, and she asked Janet, oh, hi, Janet. Is Dr. Garth home? Janet lies and says, oh, no, Dr. Garth is not home. I'm just here to get some of his paperwork straightened out for the case he's working on the whole Van Helsing murder. All of a sudden, the two women heard Dr. Garth call out, Janet, who's at the door? Countess Zaleska turned to Janet and looked and said, Janet, why did he feel it was necessary to lie to me? Janet says, well, Countess, I'll be honest with you, sister. I feel threatened by you. I like Dr. Garth, and I really don't like the idea that he's around you. Well, Zaleska says, okay, I see how it is. I try to be nice to you, and yet you feel like you have to be antagonistic to me. Well, I'm going to put a stop to this once and for all. Zaleska forced her way into the house. Janet says, wait a minute, lady, you don't force your way into the doctor's house. Zaleska says, I'll force my way into any house. I am a countess, baronet's daughter. Well, that comment really angered Janet. Janet says, like, you listen here good to me, countess. I don't care if you're some high and mighty countess. This is not Hungary. We have a different system here of behavior and etiquette. Countess Zaleska says, I had enough of you, Janet, and your little girl antics. She snaps her fingers. Well, Sandor comes into the house, and she says to Sandor in Hungarian to silence that woman and stuff her in the car. He says, yes, my countess. He quickly grabs Janet, covers her mouth, and puts her in a sleeper hold, knocking her out. He takes her away. Soon, Dr. Garth comes down, wearing his dinner suit. He's like, oh, Countess, you're here. Where did Janet go? The Countess says Janet had to leave. She said it was very important. Dr. Garth said, oh, Then he asks her, "What brings you to my home?" he asks the Countess. The Countess says, "Oh, Dr. Garth, I'm leaving back to Hungary, and I wanted to ask you a question." Dr. Garth says, "Go ahead, I'm all ears." She says to Dr. Garth, "You've helped me a lot. You helped me forget about my late husband. Now I'm in love with you, and I want you to come with me to Hungary. I can make it worth your while." Dr. Garth was shocked. He's like, I can't go. I'm an established man here in London. Besides, you usually marry counts, don't you, and other nobility?" Countess Aleska says, "I'm a countess and I'm free to choose who I want to be with, and I choose you, Dr. Garth, or should I say Jeffrey." Dr. Garth says, "No, I'm sorry, Countess, I can't." Well, Countess Aleska says, "Okay, Dr. Garth, if you refuse me, Janet's gonna get it." Suddenly, Garth turns to look at the Countess like, "What do you mean Janet's gonna get it?" Well, she says to Dr. Garth, "See, she was here and she tried to get in my way, and I had Sandor nab her and stuff her in the car. So, the question again, Dr. Garth, are you going to come with me, or is Janet going to get hurt?" Dr. Garth's voice turned very stern. He's like, "You listen to me, Countess. You lay one hair on that woman, you will be very sorry." Then it dawned on Dr. Garth. Dr. Garth said, "Countess, you never told me the name of your late husband." Countess Aleska said, "It's easy. My late husband was none other than Count Dracula, the one that Dr. Van Helsing murdered at Carfax Abbey over at Purfleet." Dr. Garth said, "So your husband's the one that's the vampire?" "Yes," she said, "he was a vampire, the king of vampires, but now that he's dead, I have his powers." "So," she says, "Doctor, if you don't reconsider my deal, your woman's gonna die. Either way, I'm gonna be very lenient towards you, and I'll let you decide. When you're ready to make up your mind, come and find me in Romania at my late husband's estate. Goodbye, Doctor," she says. She turns around to walk out the door. Dr. Garth went to stop her, and she easily overpowered him with her vampiric super strength and flung him across the room. To his surprise, when he looked at her, her sky blue eyes had turned blood red, and she had fangs, and she says, "When you're ready, Doctor, come to Romania. You'll find my husband's castle easily. The locals will tell you." Then she walks out the door. Dr. Garth could hear the car driving away as he regained his strength and got back up. Well, at Sir Humphrey's house, the telephone rings. He picks it up, and it was none other than Dr. Garth. Dr. Garth explained to him what happened. Sir Humphrey's like, "Vampires, really? That is preposterous. Oh. Okay, I'll get Dr. Van Helsing," he says. Then he hangs up the phone. Then his butler comes in. He says, "Master Basil, who was that on the phone?" Sir Humphrey's like, "Oh, it was Dr. Garth, claiming there's vampires. Now I gotta go on a vampire hunt." The butler said, "Vampire, sir, don't you usually fend them off with your checkbook?" Sir Humphrey said to his butler, "This is no time to be facetious." Well, later on at his office, as Sir Humphrey was pacing up and down waiting for Dr. Garth to arrive, Dr. Van Helsing was sitting in the chair patiently. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Humphrey says, "Come in." It was the secretary who had a message for Sir Humphrey and Dr. Van Helsing. He said it's from Dr. Garth. Well, Sir Humphrey looked and it's like, "Oh, just bloody great," as he crumpled the paper up. He says to Dr. Van Helsing, "More good news. Your friend decided to go out to Romania. He took the next ship leaving across the channel and said he'll get there by train." Dr. Van Helsing gets up from his chair and says, "Oh no, Sir Humphrey, we must stop him. He's going to his death out there." Well, some days had passed. Meanwhile, in Romania, in a village near Dracula's castle, everybody was singing and dancing as a wedding was going on. This was the first wedding in a very long time that could be had outside at night. Since Dracula's left for England, everybody was happy. You could walk the streets safe at night without being terrorized by some vampire. Well, as everybody was celebrating, suddenly the celebration cut short as somebody had noticed a light in Dracula's castle. One of the local villagers pointed and screamed, "Look! Look! Lights! In Dracula's castle! Oh no, he's back!" Soon, everybody screamed and cleared out the streets in terror. Well, just as everybody cleared the streets, a taxi cab pulled up. Well, one man stepped out of the taxi cab. It was Dr. Garth. He was wondering what happened. It looked like there was a festivity that was here and it just cleared. Well, he goes over to the inn and knocks on the door. The door of the inn opens up. The innkeeper looks and is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're closing for the night. We have no more rooms left." Dr. Garth says, "Oh, no, sir, I really don't need a room. I just need to know if I can get to that castle up there in the mountaintop." The innkeeper says, "No, no one will take you up there." Then he shuts the door and locks it. Well, Dr. Garth goes back to the taxi and asks the driver if he could take him to the castle on the mountaintop. The taxi driver looks at him and said in broken English, "It's going to cost you, sir." Dr. Garth says, "Don't worry, I'll pay for it." Well, the taxi heads out to the castle, and from the balcony, from the top half of the castle, the Countess was watching as the taxi's lights shine on the roads below, making its way to the castle. Shortly after Garth's departure, another car pulls up. It was a police car, and several men get out, including several policemen, Sir Humphreys, and Dr. Van Helsing. They also inquired from the innkeeper where Dr. Garth was at, and he told them where he was heading to. So the men stuffed themselves back into the car and drove off to Dracula's castle. Well, in Dracula's castle, Countess Zaleska tells her manservant Sandor to be ready, that they were expecting company. She says to Sandor to let Dr. Garth through, and anyone else that tries to get in after him, make sure they don't make it through. Sandor says, "Yes, my mistress." Well, Dr. Garth made it to Dracula's castle, ran inside and ran through the foyer, ran up the stairs, and made his way where the Countess was at. There in the room, he saw the unconscious Janet laying on the couch. Countess Zaleska appears, wearing her long black cape, and tells the doctor, "Well, Dr. Garth, I see you made it. Well, you stand at the threshold. If you reject me, I could easily kill Janet. She's under my control. All I have to do is whisper a command and her heart stops. But if you accept me, I'll let Janet go, I'll make her forget about the whole thing, and you and me can live happily ever after. I'm going to make you a vampire." Suddenly, Sandor overheard that while he was standing guard in the balcony, keeping an eye out for the others if they came. Then he comes into the room angrily and says, "Countess, you didn't say about making him into a vampire. All you just wanted to do was have him as some sort of lover. You say you're going to make me into a vampire and teach me secrets." Well, the Countess says, "Oh, it's okay, Sandor. I will make you a vampire in time. I always keep my promises." Sandor said, No. You're not going to make him a vampire before me. No. He's going to cause you trouble, Countess. He loves that woman, and that's all he loves. He'll be the death of you if you make him a vampire." The Countess says to Sandor angrily, "Sandor, you serve me, and I say you go back outside and make sure nobody's coming." Well, sure enough, outside, the police car pulls up to the front of the castle, and all the men unload out from the police car and run inside the castle. Well, back at the room, Sandor was confronting the Countess and says to her, "No, Countess, no. He was not supposed to be a vampire. All he was supposed to be was some sort of male concubine for you. Now you want to make him a vampire. You want to make him your equal. Master Dracula would have never done that," he said angrily. The Countess screams at Sandor, "Sandor, get back to your post, and don't disobey me again or you will be sorry." While Sandor says, "No, Countess, I will not let this happen," he lifts his crossbow, takes aim at Dr. Garth. But before he could fire the crossbow, the Countess jumped in the middle of the way to try to stop him, and it was there that he accidentally pulled the trigger and shot a bolt. Well, the bolt went right through the Countess's heart. She clutches the arrow as she let out a slight murmur of pain. Sandor just looks in horror at what he'd done. He's like, no, no, my queen, as she was falling down to the ground. Oh God, no, no, I didn't mean to do it, my mistress. I didn't mean to do it, no. Well, the Countess was dead. Then Sandor looks up at Dr. Garth and is like, this is your fault. Look what you made me do. Sandor grabs his crossbow and reloads another round. But before Sandor can fire his bolt, Sir Humphreys, Dr. Van Helsing, and several policemen come storming into the room, and they quickly shoot Sandor. Well, Sandor fell dead. After the Countess's death, Janet wakes up free from the Countess's spell. She turns to look and sees Dr. Garth. Instead of calling him Dr. Garth, she says, Geoffrey. The two run and embrace each other and passionately kiss. Everybody in the room smiled. Then Sir Humphreys and Dr. Van Helsing walk over to the dead body of Countess Nadia Zaleska. Sir Humphrey says, my God, she's a beautiful woman. Dr. Van Helsing said, yes, she was a beautiful woman 100 years ago when she died. Like and subscribe. The end.